right now on Indianapolis This Week.
Death and suffering, uncertainty and darkness doesn't have they never have the final word.
A Sunday exclusive with Archbishop Joseph Tobin, the leader of 250,000 Hoosier Catholics, on faith, the Pope, and the saints. Then Dan Coates on whether Indiana's sons and daughters are looking at military action in Europe. And Pacers proud, the governor and his trip to Germany, and the question he can't seem to shake.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
We begin with a Sunday exclusive. Archbishop Joseph Tobin leading a church facing tough economic realities, the pain of deciding the future of several parishes. And then there's the joy of Easter and the elevation of two former popes to sainthood. One has a connection to Indiana.
Well, I think Christianity is basically an encounter with a person, or the possibility of encountering. But it's not so much knowing a lot about God. You know, like you could play Trivial Pursuit, you know, or Jeopardy. I'll take God for 200, you know. It's the fact that God cares a lot about us. Cared enough to experience all we experience except for sin, and that includes death and resurrection and hatred and suffering. And that's, I think sometimes, you know, I after living outside the country for a lot of years, one thing that struck me is when I watched the nightly news, I'd say 3/4 of the commercials about health. You know, something that'll make you feel better, something that'll cure you or keep you from getting something horrible. I think we want to keep suffering and death at a distance. And Jesus didn't. He said, you know, I enter into that. Because, you know, try as we might, we're going to enter into it one way or the other. And I think what I try to convey to people is you count. And that's not my judgment, it's God's judgment. You count. And because you count, your lives are worth something. And your lives are precious. And death is not going to have the final word on your life. And so you don't have to live in fear. And you don't have to live like it's your own power, your own resources that get you through. You can share that. You can share what you have with other folks, and especially folks who have a lot less than you. Because ultimately what you have in your hands isn't going to give you life.
Someone that's reminding us of that message is Pope Francis. It's being called the Francis effect, in which he talks about really that there's greatness in simplicity. Are you finding that? Are you finding that in this Pope, he's reminding the faithful that you don't have to live in opulence, you just have to do your best in your own world, that you just have to give what you can.
Yeah, it's not simply that you live simply, but you live simply so that others can live. You know, I occasionally have to ride on an airplane, and I think the airplane's a great symbol for the world that Francis is addressing. Because up in front of the airplane, you got some people that are living pretty well, you know. They can only live that way if everybody in the back is like me, is traveling like this, you know. And Francis says, no, it doesn't have to be that way. We can all travel well together through life. We just got to be willing to share. You know, and I think he's showing that by the simplicity of his lifestyle, by the way he welcomes people that are kind of on the margin of things. So yeah, he's walking the talk.
You have to make some tough decisions on the local level as you balance which parishes to open, which to keep open. How is that going, and how much are you in prayer to make the right decisions as hundreds, thousands of people will be looking to you to make that decision?
Yeah, it's a tough call, Rafael. It's a tough call, and I say that not in a theoretical, but a lot of people in the Archdiocese know that my family's parish was closed. And I'm not sure if my mother's over it yet. You know, she's 91 years old, and this happened 10, 15 years ago, and it still is like a thorn in her heart, because her whole history was connected with this parish. You know, it's where I said my first Mass, where we had my father's funeral, where a number of my siblings were married. So, you know, that's our history. So I understand the grief and anger of people in southeast Indiana, where we've had to make some decisions, and We're going to have to make some here in the city pretty quickly. As painful as it is, what gives me some confidence is certainly the belief that God is with us and that God speaks to us through each other. So before these decisions are made, there's a listening process and sort of a conversation that goes on among the parishes themselves and the Archdiocese and authorities, and finally with me. And through all that, we still have to pray and ask the Lord to show us the right way.
I want to leave you with the joy that that Pope John Paul will be a saint, named a saint later this month in April.
Yeah.
What kind of joyous occasion will that be for the church?
Well, I think it'll be especially joyous because there'll actually be two popes that are canonized on the same day. There'll be John Paul II, as well as John the 23rd. Now, John the 23rd is going to have a special meaning here in the Archdiocese because his family name was Roncalli. Now, there's a high school on the south side, a very good high school, the Roncalli.
I think they're having a party, or they're having a viewing that day.
And they're sending a few students over there to join. I don't know how many people are going to be in Rome, but it's going to be crowded. And then John Paul II was, the great evangelist for, nearly 38 years. And so I think he restored a Catholic identity of a worldwide church because he had the youth and the strength to visit so many countries, and I think he was an example of sort of apostolic zeal, and I remember the night he died. I was living in Rome at the time, and I went over to St. Peter's Square to pray for him. And as he was dying, under his window, there were about 10,000 young people. And they were singing, and they had some guitars, and they were calling out, "Don't be afraid. You told us not to be afraid." So it was like they were giving back to him the message they had got from him. So I think a lot of those young people are maybe not so young now. He died in 2005. They're going to be in St. Peter's. And I think through television, the whole church, and maybe beyond the church as well, are going to rejoice for the two new saints.
Archbishop Tobin. Next, the governor, his trip overseas, what he expects, and the tough talk raising eyebrows about his political future. About 12,000 Hoosiers are employed by German companies. The governor went to Germany to thank some of those employers and to attract new ones. But his remarks about Russia sparked talk about a possible presidential run. I spoke with the governor via Skype while he was in Germany. So, Governor, guten Tag and wie geht's? Hello, and how are you?
We're well. It's been a busy week here in Germany, but it's been a good week for Indiana. We have a tremendous amount of interest among businesses here in Germany. We were able to make several announcements of the new companies that will be locating in the state of Indiana, and I think it bodes very well for the future, for jobs and opportunities coming to Hoosiers because of the confidence that German businesses have in our state.
In fact, you had a couple of businesses already make those announcements. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think really it's a combination of things, Rafael, that first it's a very strong business environment in Indiana. Germans like balanced budgets. They like that we have low taxes, lowering corporate taxes recently, that we have a tremendous workforce, a commitment to education. But I'll tell you, we spent a lot of time talking about Indiana's commitment to career and vocational education at the high school level. For decades here in Germany, they've put a real priority on vocational education, and people were asking us a great deal about Indiana's renewed commitment to career and vocational education. I think a combination of those factors is why the companies that you mentioned will be coming to the Hoosier State. We're grateful for that, but I think there's more to come. I really believe that Indiana's in a great position to continue to attract more foreign investment in ways that will create jobs and more investment, especially from here in Germany.
Governor, through your speech and on Twitter, you talked about Mr. Putin. You talked about the missile defense issue. You sounded more, I know you hate this question, more presidential than gubernatorial. What do you make of those comments? There are a lot of folks thought, wait a minute, he sounds more like the Secretary of State for the United States than he does the governor of Indiana.
Well, I can tell you that, as you know, I've served on the Foreign Affairs Committee for a decade in Washington, D.C., and was a strong supporter of free trade and a strong supporter of our defense alliance in NATO. And I just felt that with all that's happening, with the rise of Russian aggression in Ukraine, it'd be a good opportunity for me to express to our allies here in Germany my support for expanded trade agreements between NATO and the United States to expand our economies, but also my strong support for making sure that that all of Europe has the opportunity to be under the missile defense umbrella that NATO provides. I think that that's both the right policy for our state, our nation, and for Europe, and I also believe it's the right strategic response to Russian aggression.
And last question on this issue, Governor. For you, is there any way for you to be able to make those statements that you've made on foreign policy without anyone reading into them that you may be interested in something else? And I know that often you have told me, and that's why I never really asked you the question, that you like your job. But when you make those kinds of statements, are you sending out a mixed message at all?
Well, I love my job, and the one thing about Hoosiers is we have a great tradition in the state of Indiana of engagement in the debate over America's role on the foreign stage. And while I was here in Germany, given the background that I have and the interest that Hoosiers have, and our strong alliance with Germany and with other NATO countries, I thought it was altogether appropriate for us to take that opportunity to, as we were thanking businesses for investing in Indiana, as we were encouraging more businesses to invest, to make sure that the people of Indiana, the people of the United States, stand with the people of Germany for more expanded trade and to ensure that we're providing the support so that NATO nations will be able to defend themselves against any eventuality in the future.
Are you disliking that presidential question, sir? I've never asked you the question because I know the answer to it, but is it becoming can you escape this thing? I mean, I don't know.
Well, let me say, I'm always humbled and flattered by any mention of us for higher office. My focus is Indiana, and frankly, Rafael, I think some of those mentions are as much a reflection of the progress that our state has been making in recent years as it is of me personally. So I'll stay focused on the future of the people of Indiana, and I'll let my future take care of itself.
Joining us now, two of our political insiders, Kip Tu and Abdul Hakim Shabazz. Governor or president?
I think he's trying to have it both ways. I really do. He's trying to figure out whether he's going to run for president or run for re-election as governor. I don't think he can do both. I don't think anybody else thinks he can do both, so he's going to have to make a choice here. Clearly, when he talked about Russia, it's outside the scope of what he went over to Germany for Indiana. So it's clearly he's sending a message nationally that he wants to be in the conversation.
Oh, remember when all the speculation around Mitch Daniels about whether he would run for president, the governor finally didn't say no until he finally said no. So there's something to be said about keeping your name out and being a possible contender, particularly if you look at the current Republican field of potential presidential candidates. You know, Mike Pence looks pretty good compared to some of the folks who are out there. So
I would add to that. You know, the Republicans are trying to thread a needle here. They got social conservatives, Tea Party conservatives, and the establishment party. And Mike Pence, to his credit, has a foot in all. He's got 3 feet, I guess, a foot in every place. But you know, there's not a lot.
Story.
There's not a lot of other guys out there or ladies running for the Republican presidential nomination who've got that going for him. So he does have that going for him.
Yeah, and there are also a couple other things that have happened too, particularly his chief of staff, Bill Smith, stepping down to go work for Pence more in an advisory capacity. That sort of fueled some of the speculation that he might be running for president. You know the tweets over the weekend while he's gone, talking about missile defense. So there are lots of little things that are out there that lead to a possible presidential run. I don't think we'll know for sure until he finally says yes or no.
A lot of people are speculating that he's doing this so that he's in the conversation when it comes to Veep picks as well, and he would be probably on a lot of people's short list.
And we may see some presidential candidates in Indianapolis this week, since the NRA convention will be here in town.
Right. NRA's coming to town. You know, regardless of what you think about their policies, I believe conventions like this, law-abiding citizens, good for business, good for the local economy. So I say, come and hang out. We're happy to have your money.
Yeah, we're happy to have their money. We welcome here. I also welcome when Bloomberg brings his folks and we can finally get some sane gun policy laws in this country.
We also heard this week on the public safety tax, sort of picking up some steam. Are we going to see a public safety tax to be able to fund at least 500 officers? Is that going to happen?
I don't think we'll see a public safety tax per se, but I do think it's looking more like a possible phase out of the homestead, of the property tax homestead exemption that would cost the average taxpayer about $20. Maybe a phase out over time and using that money to hire more police officers and generate about $90 million, hire about 90 new cops, 90 to 100 police officers, and sustainable source of funding.
You get the last word?
I think we need someone to go to the legislature and get our $385 million that we send out to the rest of the state back before we start talking about raising anybody's taxes.
And, I do know your name. It is Abdul Hakim Shabazz.
I would hope so after almost 8 years.
Even though it's on the prompter. I know your name. And Kip, too. Happy Easter to both of you.
Happy Easter to you and everybody out there.
The conversation between our insiders continues on Twitter. Check out their Twitter handles and give us your opinion. And stay up with Kip, Abdul, Laura, and Jennifer throughout the week. And I'll remember all of your names. They're on the prompter. After the break, Senator Dan Coates. The president is claiming another victory on the Affordable Care Act. And is military action an option against Russia? Joining us now is the senior senator representing Indiana, Republican Senator Dan Coates. Mr. Coates has served in Congress for more than 20 years now in total. A record number of Hoosiers were deployed to both Iraq and Afghanistan since World War II. A lot of Hoosier families have seen the impact of war. This issue with Russia, are we looking at military action? Will Hoosiers be dragged into a war or some sort of military conflict?
I think that's highly unlikely. This is not a problem that needs to be solved with military action. It can be solved with tough sanctions, and it can be solved, as the president initially said, by enacting a high price for what Russia has done. In order to accomplish that, you need presidential leadership supported by a bipartisan Senate and House and American people, as well as European leadership. I think that leadership has been too tepid, too weak so far to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
So what would you do differently? Well, I mean, what should the president be doing right now besides talking in Geneva, which is what's happening now?
Well, as you know, I co-authored, along with a Democrat senator, Dick Durbin from Illinois, a list of sanctions that we sent to the White House. It was passed by the Senate unanimously. It was much tougher than what has so far been initiated. I won't go through all 15. Secondly, I put in a separate piece of legislation together, and now I'm working on a third piece with a number of my colleagues, really encouraging the White House and Western leaders, it's got to be U.S.-Europe together, this is where the conflict is, to impose, or to at least threaten to impose, if Russia doesn't back down. And so far, we've not taken the hard steps, I think, to hit them where it hurts. That's in their economy, their pocketbook, isolating them from the rest of the world community. And these are a number of initiatives that I've proposed but haven't been picked up yet by the White House.
On the home front on Thursday, the president touted that 8 million people had signed up for the Affordable Care Act, 1 million more than the White House had anticipated. Will the party stop all this talk of repeal or replace, or are you still questioning those numbers?
It was interesting. When that news came across, I was with someone who have said, listen, it took me 3 days and I had to make 7 enrollments to become eligible under Obamacare. I have 7 enrollment numbers under my name. They're counting all of those as separate people. Now, I don't know how many people fell in that category. I do know a lot of people all throughout Indiana have said, I've had to enroll 3 or 4 times in order to get accepted. So I think the numbers may be off whack. Also, we know that about 5 to 6 million people their insurance was dropped. They had no choice except to go to Obamacare, so they're counting those. So the question is new eligibilities. Beyond that, I think the policy is fundamentally flawed from a policy standpoint and from an affordability standpoint. We will see as this plays out. The president says, look, the Democrats shouldn't be afraid of this. They should run in support of this. All the Democrats I know up for election 2014 are running away from it and trying to say, we got to change this. I mean, this is not working. Mr. President, you may come to my state, but I'm sorry, I got a schedule conflict. If they really believed what the president said, I think they'd be embracing him and meeting him at the airport and saying, let's talk about Obamacare.
Dan Coates, senior senator from Indiana, we thank you so much.
Rafael, thank you.
As you know, the door's always open. Come on to visit anytime.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. Indianapolis This Week continues after the break. Thank them, and go Pacers. Here's a look ahead of the next 3 games for the Pacers. Game 2 is here on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Games 3 and 4 in Atlanta on Thursday and Saturday. I'm Rafael Sanchez. Thanks for watching. Next week, we sit down with the mayor of Kokomo. Have a great Easter Sunday.